Hey, welcome back, guys. Today we're going to be talking about Belknap Hardware Manufacturing Company. Fascinating video covering over 120 years of history. And so, why does that even matter? Why are you talking about a hardware company when you talk about knives? And that's what I'm interested in. So, the reason is right in front of you. So obviously, hardware companies produce knives, and that's why it matters to us. But if you're out there, a young cat, maybe in your 30s or 40s, this company's been out of business for 50 years. So how do you connect with that? What does it make a difference? And once again, we're talking about very highly collectible knives. Some of the finest knives ever produced were sold by Belknap Hardware Company. And these hardware companies are a really interesting side niche of knife collecting. And so you might want to learn a little bit about that if you've never even given any thought to hardware company knives. And so I hope you check out this video. It's going to be really good. I think you'll enjoy it. And thanks again.
If you know.
All right, guys and gals, welcome back to the Fortified Castle. Hi to all my viewers. Bonjour, privet, guten tag, hola, ciao, and konnichiwa to my foreign viewers. Today we're talking about cornerstone, monumental company in America, Belknap Hardware Manufacturing Company, also known as Belknap Inc. And as the name implies, they were a hardware company. So why does that matter to the knife collector? So you have to kind of step back when you're talking about these things, because if you talk about a hardware company, you think about Ace Hardware. Maybe you could even think about Lowe's or some other hardware companies. And we just don't view them as pillars of the knife community nowadays. But 120 years ago, 150 years ago, 180 years ago, these companies were instrumental in America to produce and provide goods for an expanding country. A country that was not yet fully formed, by the way, and in many, many, many cases, in communities that were not fully formed. And so that's the importance of these companies. The importance of their own company was not lost upon them. They realized that this country was burgeoning, expanding, growing, and it was up to them to provide goods for that population of people. And so because of that, they oftentimes had very strict quality guidelines on the things that they sold. They wanted to give the best to people. That is the mentality that is important to the knife collector. Because of that, they made fantastic knives of very high quality. Now, very few hardware companies actually made knives. They contracted, but the people they contracted with were often the premium knife makers in the country. And that's the knives they were providing to their customers. And so that was the knife that we get, and why it's so interesting to collect these knives. And so let's start looking at this company in particular. So the story of Belknap Hardware kind of formulates well, the company is established in 1840, but prior to that, young William Burke Belknap was involved with his father in a steel business. So he helped his father establish furnaces that produced steel in Kentucky. And he kind of did the groundwork for his father. And so he not only had a fundamental underlying of the steel industry, but of business as a whole, which served him well when he actually established his own business in 1840. And so he did that in Louisville, Kentucky. So that was an ideal location. That area sat right on the Ohio River, on the border between Kentucky and Ohio. And in the 1840s was the westward expansion of the United States. People were moving west. And so hardware companies that were on these traditional routes of movement to the west supplied travelers, uh, explorers, government expeditions, as well as homesteaders moving west. And it was a crucial function and location that Belknap chose, and it helped to grow his business substantially. So right now we're looking at some of the different names of the company. The earliest one was W.B. Belknap from 1840 to around 1868. The company used that logo. And then the next one was W.B. Belknap and Company. And so that ran from around the 1860s to the 1880s. Next, you get W.B. Belknap Hardware and Manufacturing Company, Inc. That ran from about 1804 to 1865. And in 1865, they shortened it to just Belknap Inc. That's the company name that ran between 1868 and 1985, just before they went out of business. Belknap went on to become one of the largest hardware companies in the world, not only America, but the world. And they lasted the longest. So you're talking about family owned, wholly owned type company. Was one of the last to fold in America before you get the franchises like Ace Hardware, that type of thing, True Value Hardware. And so it lasted longer than, it lasted 25 years longer than Shipley's, by the way. So next we're going to look at where the knives come into all of this. So all along, the company is producing, selling knives, of course. But in 1890, they decide to sell their own brand of knives. And that initial branding was John Primble. This is not the earliest marking. I'm going to show you that. But it's one of the earliest brands, John Primble. It was a premium line of knives. And this one doesn't date back to that point in time, by the way. But it's just the earliest that they started marketing their own brand on the knife. Bear in mind, they never produced their own knives, so they're still contract knives. And that's one of the interesting thing about these knives. When you get a knife that has John Primble on it, it was made by somebody else. And so you can see right there, John Primble, Belknap Hardware Manufacturing Company. So this was made, I think this was made by Schrade, by the way, but could have been Camillus. Pretty sure it's a Schrade. And that's the cool thing about collecting these knives is a lot of times knives are made by premium knife companies like Robeson, Cattaraugus, New York Life Company, premium knife companies. And when you can buy them in their hardware form for half the price that you would pay for a regular knife that say would have Cattaraugus on it. That's a really interesting thing about collecting these knives. And then, of course, you really don't know who made them. And so you have to take that knife and kind of figure out, who made the knife. This one here was made by Boker. If you look at it, it's kind of obvious. But wasn't always obvious, and it's kind of a fun thing to do when you're collecting these hardware knives. So let's look at their branding. The first one was John Premble, but the oldest marking on that, I've got it up on the screen right now, was John Premble India Steelworks. That comes out around 1890, and that marking, I'm sorry, that marking was consistent up to 1940 when they stopped using that marking. After that is when you see the John Premble marking that I just showed you. Um, Another early one was bluegrass cutlery. So it's alternative marking that they used. That came out about 1898, ran to 1950. After that, the bluegrass marking, you don't find them on their knives except for Barlow knives. They continued it on their Barlow knives. They used John Premble India Steel Works from 1890 to 1940. You can find John Premble, Germany, made by Heinrich Boker out of Germany in 1955. And then Blue Ribbon Cutlery Company, that was a marking that ran from 1910 to 1952. Pine Knot is a really rare marking on Boker knives. That ran from 1930 to about 1940. Those are so rare that they're often counterfeited, so you have to be really careful when you buy the knives. So I want to talk about the knives just a little bit in collecting the knives. Um, I've given you the different dates that you can find to collect these knives, and honestly, they're highly collectible and very hard to find the old ones. And so mostly you see knives like these. This, I believe, was produced in the late 40s, maybe early 50s. You see the mark, John Premble, finest steel. And there's the mark on it. Let me just get it in. John Premble, Belknap Hardware. That's their standard mark. I think this knife is a Boker. It was produced by Boker, by the way. And that's part of the problem. You see a lot of these knives with John Premble in there. When the company went out of business, Bluegrass Cutlery bought the trademark, and so Bluegrass Cutlery started reproducing knives with the John Premble tang stamp on it. Mostly, this is what you see. That's mostly what you see on the Bluegrass Cutlery marks. Up to the 2000, Bluegrass printed it, put a date on the knife so you could distinguish between a vintage knife and one produced by Bluegrass Cutlery. But after that, I think they quit doing it. And nowadays, when you buy them, yeah, you can't really be sure of the date of those knives. And so that's really the problem with collecting these knives. But you can find, if you want to get a good vintage bluegrass knife, look for that older tang stamp, John Premble Belknap Manufacturing Company. Those at least are going to date back to 1968 or before. And then you can kind of figure out from the type of knife that you have how old it is. Again, the oldest ones are going to date back into the 40s, pre-40 era. Those are really hard to find. And those are the ones that are coveted. So you're looking for not knives that have these etch markings but date back before pre-World War II. So the John Premble India Steelworks or India Steel Marks, I'll show that up there for you right now. Those are the oldest, and those are the ones you should be looking for. The other ones, they're newer knives produced after 1985 and are not as collectible. Another variation in these knives is a star, which I don't have that, I don't think. Let me look at this one real quick. Yeah, I don't have one that has a star on it. That's somewhat controversial. You have John Trimble with the star on the back of them. There's a star with the model number. A lot of commenters say those are Boker knives, but some commenters say that they're made by Camillus. So I don't know uh, which of those statements is true, honestly. And when I'm talking about commenters, I'm talking about guys who have written books, guys who collect knives, and know a whole lot more than you or I about these knives. So there's a difference of opinion about, that star. It seems like most people say it came from Boker. I look into Boker history. I don't find any mention of the star being used on John Trimble knives, so I don't know which statement is true, but it's either going to be Camillus or Boker. In that time frame, those that don't have the star in that 1960 era were made by Schrade. And so that's some of the things you got to look out for. You have to be really careful when you're looking at pine knot knives. Because they're so rare and collectible, they are counterfeited. And so you have to really do your research on that. Look at what that logo looks like. Those knives were made by Robertson. It's really easy to match them up to a Robertson catalog and see that the knife is exactly like a Robertson. It just has a pine knot tang stamp on it. So you just have to be a little bit careful about that. And the other thing is, in general, you have to realize that these knives, although Bluegrass Cutlery had the trademark and produced those type of stamped knives, John Trimble knives, other people, like some knives came out of China that have John Trimble on them, and knives came out of Germany with John Trimble on them. So you just have to be careful overall on the knife that you're buying. The reason is you could see a knife like this marked as a John Trimble knife, and because they're so collectible, there's a $200 price tag on the knife when the knife is really a post 1968 knife, either a knockoff coming in from China or Germany, or a Bluegrass Cutlery knife that is not worth $200. Okay, so just look. I think the best thing you could do is look for that Belknap Hardware Manufacturing Company tang stamp, and I will concentrate on those knives right there to collect if you want to get a good John Trimble knife. And it's going to take you a while to find, and you may have to pay a little bit to get it because they are highly collectible. So I hope you found it informative. The fascinating collection niche, looking into these hardware type knives that were sold by hardware companies. Oftentimes very high quality knives, really cool collecting them, and a bunch of different type of hardwares that were collectible. And so I hope you found the video informative, and really appreciate your support. Thanks.